Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber Audio Magazine. Each edition brings you sharp insights and fresh perspectives from the world of cybersecurity, straight to your ears. For more resources and content, visit baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me. Let's dive in. Ransomware is often painted as a faceless crime of code, where shadowy hackers unleash malicious software and vanish into the dark web. But the truth is far more unsettling. These attacks are not random bursts of digital chaos. They are carefully engineered operations run with the discipline and structure of a legitimate startup. Behind every ransom note and flashing countdown timer lies an organization that thinks in terms of profit margins, market share, and return on investment. For them, the encrypted files are not the real product. Your fear, your uncertainty, and your willingness to pay are what drive their revenue. It can feel strange to compare cybercriminals to Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, but the similarities are undeniable. Both chase growth by scaling quickly, building efficient systems, and expanding their networks of partners. The ransomware gang just swaps office parks for hidden servers and angel investors for cryptocurrency wallets. They have affiliates, onboarding processes, even customer support desks that would rival small businesses in their professionalism. The only difference is that instead of offering productivity tools, they peddle panic, disruption, and blackmail. That is what makes ransomware so dangerous. It is not only a technical threat, it is a psychological one. Attackers know that panic is profitable, and they manipulate victims with the precision of seasoned sales teams. Their success rests less on the strength of their code than on the weakness of human response. In this episode, we will pull back the curtain to expose how these gangs operate, how they weaponize fear, and, most importantly, how you can start thinking differently about defending against them. When you picture ransomware gangs, the first thought is often a lone hacker hunched over a laptop in a dark room, launching attacks with minimal organization. But the truth is far closer to a fully functioning startup than an isolated criminal. Modern gangs operate with remarkable structure, mirroring Silicon Valley playbooks in everything from product design to partner recruitment. At the heart of their model lies ransomware as a service, or RaaS, a subscription platform where criminals can purchase or rent access to powerful attack tools. Just like legitimate SaaS companies, these platforms have multiple pricing tiers, user documentation, and even customer support, except the customers are aspiring cybercriminals. This model allows individuals with limited technical expertise to enter the ransomware market, effectively lowering the barrier to entry while multiplying the reach of the gang. By transforming malware into a product anyone can buy, these groups achieve scalability that once seemed impossible, expanding their footprint across industries and continents. Affiliates are the lifeblood of this system, and they are compensated in ways that feel uncomfortably familiar to anyone who has worked in sales. When an affiliate successfully deploys ransomware and extracts a payment, they keep a commission, sometimes up to 70% of the total ransom. The core gang retains the rest, ensuring both sides profit. This arrangement incentivizes broad participation without requiring the central group to manage every attack directly. Like franchise owners in a fast food chain, affiliates take on the local risks and operations, while the brand owners collect royalties. To keep things running smoothly, gangs track affiliate performance, monitor outcomes, and occasionally cut off underperformers. The entire setup mimics a sales organization, where revenue is tracked in dashboards, performance is monitored, and success is measured not in customer satisfaction, but in the number of victims coerced into paying. It's a system designed to spread risk, distribute labor, and maximize profit. Victim selection is another arena where ransomware gangs show their business acumen. Just as companies conduct market research before launching a new product, attackers carefully weigh potential return on investment before striking. They assess industries for vulnerabilities and likelihood of payment, focusing on sectors where downtime is disastrous. Hospitals are particularly attractive because lives are at stake when systems fail, pushing administrators toward quick compliance. Local governments, often saddled with outdated technology and underfunded IT departments, are another favorite, as are manufacturers whose halted production lines translate into enormous financial losses. This cost-benefit analysis ensures that resources are spent only where payouts are likely. It's not chaos, it's calculated market targeting, where the customers are organizations least able to tolerate disruption and most willing to pay for a fast resolution. In this sense, every attack resembles a calculated investment, one with projected returns and risk assessments guiding the final decision. What makes this corporate mimicry even more disturbing is the way gangs manage their client interactions. Many victims are shocked to discover that ransomware operators provide chat portals that feel indistinguishable from customer service platforms. Messages are polite, responses are timely, and operators even use empathetic phrasing like, "We understand this is difficult for you." Victims are sometimes provided with proof-of-life decryption samples, allowing a handful of files to be restored as evidence that payment will indeed unlock the rest. This practice mirrors product demonstrations designed to build confidence in the offering. Some groups even maintain service-level expectations, replying quickly and offering flexible payment options if negotiations drag on. It is extortion cloaked in professionalism, a sinister twist on the customer experience models perfected by legitimate companies. For organizations already under immense pressure, this blend of menace and politeness creates a psychological trap, making payment feel not only inevitable but oddly transactional, like settling a bill with an unpleasant but necessary vendor. The big picture that emerges is chilling. Ransomware gangs are not amateurs improvising attacks, but structured enterprises running efficient business models. They deploy scalable products, recruit global affiliates, analyze markets, and maintain customer-facing operations, all in pursuit of maximum profit. What sets them apart is not their technical genius, but their ability to exploit both economic logic and human psychology. By thinking of ransomware in business terms, sales funnels, commissions, ROI tracking, we can begin to see why this criminal industry has exploded. It thrives not just on software vulnerabilities, but on the very same principles that fuel legitimate corporations: efficiency, scalability, and customer management. Understanding this transformation is crucial because it reveals why ransomware is no longer a nuisance, but a global economic threat, one that grows stronger every time it is treated as random crime instead of the structured enterprise it has become. When we examine the financial side of ransomware, what stands out most is how sophisticated and disciplined these gangs have become in managing their money. Cryptocurrency serves as the foundation of their entire business model, and while Bitcoin remains the most widely recognized and accepted form of ransom payment, it's far from the only option. Criminal groups understand the trade-offs between liquidity, traceability, and anonymity. Bitcoin, despite its reputation for secrecy, leaves a visible ledger trail on the blockchain. That trail can and has been used by law enforcement to identify and track illicit payments, sometimes even leading to arrests or asset recovery. Because of this, many gangs now favor privacy-focused coins like Monero, which employ advanced obfuscation techniques to conceal transaction histories. This shift toward Monero is less about preference and more about survival. Criminals are constantly adapting their financial playbooks to make sure money flows remain difficult to follow. Beyond simply choosing currencies, ransomware gangs deploy an entire arsenal of laundering techniques to make their financial footprints disappear. One common tool is the crypto mixer, a service that blends transactions from multiple sources into one pool before redistributing them, effectively erasing any direct connection between payer and recipient. This process is akin to shuffling bills in a money counter. Once they emerge, it is almost impossible to know where they came from. In addition to mixers, gangs rotate wallets frequently, often generating new addresses for each payment or stage of a transaction. This rotation creates layers of obfuscation that require immense resources for investigators to unravel. Even when authorities do manage to trace some funds, the trail often forks into dozens or hundreds of directions, wasting time and complicating enforcement. For gangs, the cost of these laundering methods is trivial compared to the protection they provide against asset seizures and arrests. What's striking is how closely this underground economy mirrors legitimate financial systems. Just as corporations diversify their portfolios to spread risk, ransomware gangs diversify their laundering strategies. They monitor cryptocurrency market fluctuations and adjust their ransom demands accordingly, ensuring they don't lose value due to sudden price drops. Some even hedge across multiple coins, demanding partial payments in Bitcoin for liquidity and Monero for anonymity. This level of financial planning suggests not just opportunism, but genuine sophistication. In fact, financial analysts who study these operations have noted uncanny parallels between how ransomware gangs manage their funds and how investment firms balance their risk exposure. The difference, of course, is that one operates under regulations and transparency requirements, while the other thrives in secrecy. Yet the tools and strategies look remarkably similar, proving that these criminals are not just hackers, they are shadow bankers running complex financial systems. Adding another layer of complexity, cybercriminals are acutely aware that exchanges, the places where cryptocurrency is converted into fiat money, are choke points for law enforcement. Regulators and investigators watch these platforms closely, requiring them to implement anti-money laundering controls and suspicious transaction reporting. To avoid detection, ransomware operators often use smaller, less regulated exchanges or funnel funds through jurisdictions with weak oversight. In some cases, they build elaborate chains of transactions across dozens of platforms to muddy the trail before attempting a cash-out. Others rely on peer-to-peer markets, bypassing exchanges altogether by selling cryptocurrency directly to buyers in private transactions. The goal in every case is to minimize visibility and maximize plausible deniability. Each move is calculated, deliberate, and structured, further proving that these operations resemble financial institutions, albeit once designed entirely to evade oversight. For defenders, this financial agility is as dangerous as the malware itself. In the end, what we see is a cash register that never stops ringing. Each successful ransom fills wallets with digital currency that can be laundered, converted, and reinvested in new operations. The sophistication of this financial pipeline is what allows ransomware to remain so resilient. Even when law enforcement makes a high-profile seizure or takedown, the system adapts quickly, shifting tactics, currencies, or laundering channels. For victims, this reality underscores the futility of expecting payments to vanish into obscurity. Once the money leaves, it fuels the next wave of attacks, helping gangs refine their business models and expand their reach. Understanding this financial backbone is critical because it explains why ransomware persists. The money moves efficiently, securely, and profitably for criminals. Until those flows are disrupted, the economics will continue to favor attackers, and every organization connected to the internet remains part of their potential customer base, whether they like it or not. One of the most unsettling innovations in the ransomware economy is the rise of double extortion. In earlier years, gangs simply encrypted files and demanded payment for the decryption key. Today, that tactic alone is no longer enough to guarantee compliance. Victims have grown savvier, building backup systems that sometimes allow them to recover without paying. To counter this, gangs added a second weapon: data theft. Before triggering the encryption phase, attackers quietly exfiltrate sensitive files from the victim's network. This means victims are now faced with two crises at once: losing access to their operational data and the threat of having confidential information exposed to the world. Even if backups work perfectly, the organization still risks reputational harm, regulatory penalties, and lawsuits if stolen data is leaked. This dual-threat approach has dramatically increased the success rate of ransom payments, as it pushes pressure points that extend far beyond IT systems. Public shaming is a central pillar of the double extortion strategy. Many ransomware gangs now maintain leak sites where they publish stolen data from non-paying victims. These sites often resemble blogs or news portals, complete with logos, organized lists of compromised companies, and downloadable files. The message is clear: pay or your secrets become public property. The threat is especially effective because these sites are often monitored by journalists, competitors, and even regulators, amplifying the damage instantly. For a corporation, the potential embarrassment of having trade secrets, customer records, or executive emails exposed is often more damaging than the encrypted files themselves. The gangs exploit this fear skillfully, timing releases for maximum impact, sometimes coinciding with quarterly earnings, board meetings, or ongoing negotiations. In doing so, they weaponize media attention, turning every headline into leverage and every news cycle into another pressure point. The legal consequences of data exposure further strengthen the gang's hand. Depending on the jurisdiction, organizations may be legally required to report breaches to regulators, notify affected customers, and potentially face class action lawsuits. This cascade of obligations turns a technical problem into a multi-layered legal and financial crisis. Ransomware gangs understand this and use it as part of their negotiation strategy, reminding victims of the costs and consequences of non-compliance. The logic is simple. Even if you have backups, do you really want regulators, lawyers, and the public breathing down your neck? By framing the ransom as the cheaper solution, they repackage extortion as a cost avoidance decision, making the criminal payment feel disturbingly rational. It is a calculated psychological tactic, one that exploits executives' aversion to legal exposure and reputational damage more than their fear of downtime. In effect, the ransom becomes not just a payment for data recovery, but a shield against public and regulatory fallout. Countdown timers and staged threats serve as accelerants in this process, amplifying fear and urgency. Victims are presented with ticking clocks that threaten escalating consequences if deadlines are not met. At first, the demands may seem negotiable, but as the timer ticks down, gangs introduce new risks. Releasing partial data dumps, publishing customer lists, or hinting at even more damaging disclosures yet to come. Each stage ramps up anxiety, forcing decision-makers to weigh the potential fallout of hesitation against the price of immediate payment. False deadlines are sometimes inserted to test how far victims are willing to push back, creating psychological uncertainty. The entire process mirrors hostage negotiations, except the hostages here are both the company's data and its reputation. Every passing hour feels like another card dealt in a rigged game, with the criminals controlling both the pace and the stakes. Panic becomes the true product being sold. For organizations on the receiving end, double extortion is a nightmare that reshapes the entire risk landscape. Paying once no longer guarantees safety because the stolen data may resurface months or even years later, posted on dark web forums or sold to other criminals. Some gangs even return to the same victim with fresh demands, citing their knowledge of vulnerabilities as leverage. The cycle can become endless, effectively turning ransomware into a subscription-based model of extortion. This evolution underscores the adaptability of cybercriminals and their ability to continually find new levers of pressure. It also highlights why defending against ransomware requires more than just reliable backups. Organizations must prepare for the reputational, legal, and psychological dimensions of these attacks. The double-edged sword of extortion cuts deeper than encrypted files. It slices into trust, credibility, and the very identity of an organization. Understanding this shift is essential for building defenses that match the reality of modern cybercrime.
Negotiating with ransomware gangs is not a straightforward process of haggling over price. It is a carefully staged psychological battle designed to maximize stress. From the moment victims make contact, they are greeted with visible countdown timers ticking away the hours until disaster. These timers are not mere theatrics. They are precision tools for inducing urgency and panic. Deadlines often shift depending on how victims respond, with gangs strategically shortening or extending them to maintain leverage. If a company delays too long, the threat escalates. Partial data leaks, warnings of full disclosures, or increases in ransom demands. In some cases, attackers introduce false deadlines simply to test the victim's resolve, watching closely to see how far they can push before compliance kicks in. This constant manipulation of time ensures that victims are never in control of the negotiation, trapped instead in a cycle of dread where every decision feels like a gamble.
Beyond time pressure, gangs employ emotional manipulation as a central tactic. They often use empathy-laden language, telling victims things like, "We understand your pain," or "This is difficult for both of us." These phrases are not signs of compassion, but tools of control, designed to build false rapport and lower defenses. By referring to victims as clients rather than targets, criminals frame themselves as service providers, offering a solution instead of aggressors causing harm. This warped framing changes the victim's perception, creating a sense of dialogue rather than confrontation. Guilt is another weapon, with gangs reminding organizations that they failed to patch systems, ignored warnings, or neglected training. The message is clear: this is your fault, and we are just here to fix it, for a price. By mirroring tone, adopting polite phrasing, and simulating professionalism, attackers turn an act of coercion into something disturbingly similar to a business transaction. Pricing strategy in these negotiations follows patterns familiar to anyone who has ever bought a car or haggled at a market stall. Ransom demands typically begin at inflated levels, knowing full well that victims will balk. But this is only the opening move. Discounts are quickly introduced to reward fast payment, creating the illusion of a bargain. If you pay within 48 hours, the ransom is reduced by half, becomes a recurring phrase, nudging victims toward impulsive compliance. Price tiers may even vary depending on the industry, with healthcare organizations facing higher demands than small businesses because of their urgent need to restore operations. Cryptocurrency market fluctuations add another layer, with gangs sometimes adjusting demands to account for Bitcoin or Monero price swings. To manage this process, many groups employ human negotiators who act more like salespeople than criminals, guiding victims step by step toward a payment that feels both inevitable and reasonable. It is extortion cloaked in the language of customer discounts and loyalty perks. To further tilt the battlefield, gangs often exploit internal organizational confusion. By contacting multiple employees within the same company, they fracture the chain of communication, creating parallel negotiation tracks that dilute response efforts. In some cases, they impersonate third parties, posing as IT contractors, legal advisors, or even government officials to sow additional chaos. The result is a divided response team unsure who is speaking truth and who is an imposter.
At the same time, misinformation campaigns may be launched, seeding rumors that further erode trust inside the organization. By fragmenting the victim's focus, gangs ensure they maintain control over the narrative, exploiting every crack in communication lines to weaken resistance. The more confused the organization becomes, the more likely it is to make mistakes, disclose sensitive information, or simply give in to the demands. Divide and conquer is not just a battlefield tactic. It is central to the psychology of ransomware extortion. Finally, some gangs view negotiation not as a one-time opportunity, but as the start of a long-term relationship with their victims. Past victims are sometimes revisited, targeted again with new demands because criminals know the vulnerabilities and fear still exist. Data stolen during earlier breaches may resurface months later, reigniting the crisis and forcing organizations back into negotiation. In certain cases, gangs even offer good faith discounts for future payments, creating a grotesque parody of customer loyalty programs. Payment plans are introduced, turning extortion into a subscription model where companies pay repeatedly to keep their data safe. This long game transforms ransomware from a single event into an ongoing cycle, conditioning victims to expect repeat demands. For the criminals, this strategy ensures a steady revenue stream. For the victims, it creates an endless nightmare where the first payment is only the beginning. Negotiation, then, is less about resolution and more about establishing a continuing business relationship on the attacker's terms. When examining the mindset of ransomware operators, one of the first realities to understand is that their attacks are rarely personal. Targets are not chosen because of grudges or vendettas, but because they represent opportunity. For most attackers, a victim is nothing more than an IP address flagged by an algorithm, a digital profile exposed by a vulnerability scan, or a set of credentials leaked in a breach. Offense has become largely automated, with bots constantly probing the internet for soft targets, unpatched systems, open ports, or weak authentication. Once a weakness is found, the ransomware infrastructure takes over, deploying payloads at scale with little human decision-making. This depersonalization helps gangs maintain emotional distance. It is not about harming a particular hospital, law firm, or manufacturer. It is about maximizing return on effort. The fact that lives or livelihoods may be disrupted is irrelevant to the criminal. To them, it is simply the cost of doing business. Risk versus reward plays a central role in shaping how ransomware gangs behave. They are not reckless. In fact, they are strategic in where and how they operate. Many deliberately base themselves in jurisdictions where cybercrime laws are weak, enforcement is lax, or governments tacitly tolerate their activity. This creates a shield of protection that allows them to act with near impunity. International cooperation on cybercrime remains fragmented, so the odds of extradition or prosecution are extremely low if the criminals stay within their safe zones. Cryptocurrency further tilts the scales by providing anonymity and limiting traceability, ensuring that profits can be reaped without easy detection. The outcome is a distorted equation where the rewards of successful attacks vastly outweigh the risks of getting caught. For most gangs, the biggest danger is not arrest, but competition from rival groups. This imbalance is what keeps the ransomware ecosystem thriving, because from the attacker's perspective, the risks are negligible. Within the hacker subculture, cybercrime has been glamorized and turned into a badge of honor. Online forums provide recognition and status for those who pull off large-scale breaches or release new tools. Leaderboards track exploits like high scores in a game, rewarding participants with prestige among their peers. Meme culture flourishes in these spaces, mocking victims, celebrating successful attacks, and framing cybercrime as both rebellious and entertaining. Narratives of digital Robin Hoods circulate, portraying attackers as fighters against corporations or governments, even when the reality is simple greed. These stories are powerful recruiting tools, drawing in ambitious newcomers eager to make a name for themselves. In this environment, success is not only financial, but social. The more damage a hacker causes, the more respect they command in the community. It is this blend of money and reputation that fuels the culture of criminal cool, sustaining the appeal of ransomware as both a business and a lifestyle. Ethics in this world exist, but they are warped and inconsistent. Some groups publicly declare that they will not target hospitals, charities, or schools, claiming to operate under a code of conduct. This serves two purposes. It shields them from the worst public backlash and allows them to frame themselves as principled operators rather than indiscriminate criminals. Yet these codes are selectively enforced, often ignored when profits are at stake. Affiliates may be expelled for crossing certain lines, but others are rewarded for pushing boundaries. Collateral damage, such as patients losing access to medical care or cities losing access to critical infrastructure, is often dismissed as unfortunate but acceptable. Justifications range from political rhetoric to economic necessity, with some hackers convincing themselves they are part of a broader movement against corrupt systems. Whether sincere or self-serving, these ethical claims highlight how deeply criminals rationalize their behavior, cloaking crime in the language of morality. The final layer of this mindset is psychological distance. By treating victims as abstract entities rather than people, attackers reduce feelings of guilt or remorse. A breached company is not a community of employees and customers. It is just a dataset, a target, or a wallet waiting to be drained. Within these groups, compartmentalization reinforces this detachment. Developers focus solely on creating malware and never see the human impact. Negotiators interact with victims but operate through scripts, never witnessing the chaos their demands cause in real time. This division of labor creates an emotional buffer, allowing individuals to continue their roles without confronting the harm they inflict. "It's just business" becomes a mantra that absolves responsibility, dehumanizing victims and normalizing exploitation. Over time, this mental framework hardens into indifference, making it easier for gangs to repeat attacks without hesitation. It is this psychological distance, perhaps more than any technical skill, that allows ransomware to thrive. When ransomware gangs select their targets, they are not rolling dice. They are systematically scanning the digital landscape for weak links, much like burglars casing a neighborhood for unlocked doors. Unpatched systems are among the easiest ways in. Vulnerabilities that have already been identified, and sometimes even publicly documented, remain open because organizations fail to apply updates in time. Legacy software, no longer supported by vendors, becomes a goldmine for attackers who know that fixes will never come. The absence of multi-factor authentication is another glaring opportunity, essentially leaving the front door wide open for credential theft. Poor endpoint visibility makes it difficult for defenders to even know they have been breached until it is too late. Misconfigured firewalls and exposed ports complete the list of common weak points, providing attackers with simple, low-cost pathways into environments that should be better protected. To gangs, every overlooked patch and misconfigured setting is like cash left on the table. Industry targeting adds another layer of precision to their strategy. Healthcare organizations are especially vulnerable because they balance low security investment with life or death operational demands. Every minute a hospital is offline increases the pressure to pay quickly, making it a favorite target. Education is another common victim, with sprawling networks, low budgets, and frequent turnover of students and staff creating fertile ground for attackers. Local governments are notorious for outdated technology and understaffed IT teams, leaving city halls and county offices exposed. Manufacturing firms are particularly attractive because downtime translates directly into financial loss when production lines stop. Law firms, on the other hand, hold highly sensitive client information that can devastate reputations if leaked. By focusing on these industries, gangs aren't acting randomly. They are following the same logic businesses use to identify high-value markets, only in this case, the product is extortion and the customer is trapped. Backup practices, or the lack thereof, are another factor in victim selection. Criminals actively probe to determine whether an organization has reliable backups, and if so, how quickly they can restore operations. No air-gapped backups means attackers can encrypt or destroy copies as easily as the original data. Backup servers that remain connected to production systems are often compromised and locked down during the attack. Even when backups exist, slow restoration times create pressure to pay rather than wait for a lengthy recovery. Testing is often neglected, leaving organizations to discover only in the middle of a crisis that their backups are incomplete or corrupted. Cloud-based backups are not immune either, as misconfigurations or overlooked settings can create painful gaps. From the attacker's perspective, every flaw in backup planning increases leverage. They know that an organization with poor recovery strategies is far more likely to cave under pressure, making these weaknesses just as valuable as open network ports. The leakability factor is another powerful criterion in determining who gets attacked. Criminals want victims who fear embarrassment or legal fallout from data exposure. Companies holding celebrity data, sensitive legal files, or confidential business negotiations are prime targets. Mergers and acquisitions attract attention because attackers understand the sensitivity and urgency of those transactions. Organizations with a history of prior breaches are often revisited, as attackers assume lingering vulnerabilities remain. Publicly traded companies are especially attractive because bad press can ripple into stock price volatility, applying immediate financial pressure. In every case, attackers seek victims whose data carries weight outside the IT department. Information that can damage reputations, destabilize negotiations, or tank market value. By weaponizing this leverage, gangs expand their arsenal beyond encrypted files to include social, financial, and reputational threats, all designed to force payment as the least damaging option. Social engineering completes the targeting equation, reminding us that humans are often the weakest link. High employee turnover means new staff may not be well trained in security awareness, making them easy marks for phishing campaigns. Attackers track click rates from past phishing attempts, identifying organizations where employees are prone to opening malicious links or attachments. Open-source intelligence, gathered from social media, press releases, and public records, helps attackers craft convincing pretexts for spear-phishing emails. Credential reuse is rampant, so passwords stolen in unrelated breaches are repurposed to gain access to corporate systems. Human resources departments are especially vulnerable as they routinely open attachments from unknown sources, often disguised as job applications. Each of these entry points is relatively low effort but high yield for attackers, allowing them to bypass technical defenses by targeting human behavior. By layering technical weaknesses with social vulnerabilities, ransomware gangs maximize their chances of success before they ever launch the actual attack. Breaking the cycle of ransomware begins with a shift in mindset. Too often, organizations assume backups alone are sufficient, only to discover under pressure that those backups are outdated, compromised, or painfully slow to restore. A restore-first mentality means testing backups regularly, keeping copies offline or air-gapped, and practicing full recovery drills that simulate real-world attacks. This is not just an IT responsibility, it is an organizational discipline. Companies must stop thinking of recovery as a checklist item and start treating it as a core business process, no different from financial audits or safety inspections. By embedding restoration drills into routine operations, organizations turn resilience into muscle memory, ensuring that when, not if, a ransomware attack occurs, panic doesn't dictate the response. Eliminating entry points is equally essential. Remote desktop protocols and VPNs, so often left exposed, should be hardened with strict controls and multi-factor authentication. Patching must be aggressive and continuous, especially for internet-facing systems. Blocking risky features like Office macros by default cuts off an entire category of attacks that thrive on phishing emails. Regular audits of open ports, unused software, and system misconfigurations reduce the attack surface gangs rely on to get in. These steps may not be glamorous, but they are the cyber equivalent of locking doors and checking windows before leaving the house. Criminals seek the path of least resistance, and every barrier raised increases the likelihood they will move on to easier prey. Defense is rarely about perfection. It is about making attacks more costly than they are worth. Disrupting the ransomware economy itself requires coordinated effort. Every ransom paid validates the business model, funding the next wave of attacks. While there may be exceptions in life-threatening scenarios, resisting payment when possible weakens the incentive structure that drives this crime. Rapid reporting of incidents helps law enforcement track patterns, dismantle infrastructure, and warn others. Some defenders go further, leaking decoy data or exposing negotiation channels to undermine the criminal's credibility. Feeding misinformation or cutting off contact pathways can throw a wrench into otherwise polished operations. At a broader level, organizations that share intelligence collectively raise the cost of doing business for attackers. Criminals thrive in isolation, exploiting one victim at a time. By collaborating across industries and governments, defenders can turn the tables, shifting the balance of power away from attackers and toward resilience. The final lesson is cultural. Cybersecurity cannot remain the exclusive domain of the IT department. Organizations must cultivate a culture of breach readiness, where every employee, from executives to interns, understands their role in defense. Phishing simulations, tabletop exercises, and department-specific threat modeling transform abstract risks into lived experience. Asset inventories kept current ensure clarity on what must be protected, while least privilege policies limit damage when breaches occur. Legal and communication teams should be woven into ransomware playbooks, so negotiations and public responses are practiced long before an attack arrives. In the end, ransomware thrives because of psychology as much as technology. Fear, confusion, and unpreparedness are the attacker's sharpest weapons. Breaking the cycle requires flipping that psychology, instilling confidence, clarity, and readiness at every level. With preparation, ransomware becomes less a nightmare and more a challenge, one that organizations are equipped to face, resist, and overcome. Thanks for listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Audio Newsletter. Stay sharp, stay secure, and explore more resources at baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me.